Hello, everybody. It's Elena here from Rewired Inspire, and I have a very special guest today. I want to introduce you to my special guest. His name is Don Spencer, and Don was voted the world's fastest hypnotist. Don is the CEO of Sleep Now, and he is considered by his peers and friends to be one of the greatest performers in his profession. He was born and raised in LA, California, and Don appeared on MTV Asia, Studio 23, Fox, PlayboyTV, Virgin Radio, Voice of the Caribbean, NBC, ABC, CBS, and has been heard on hundreds of radio programs worldwide. Don has trained over 25,000 people in hypnosis and has hypnotized over 1,000 people worldwide. He traveled the USA and abroad, giving lectures and seminars, creating miracles on demand with his hypnosis skill. Don taught hypnosis for 4 years at a local community college. Plus, he hosted a weekly radio program called the Mastermind Hour. Thousands of people tuned in. In 1986 to present day, Don began his work as a hypnotherapist. His most influential teachers at the time were Charles Tebetts, Ormand McGill, Jim Russell, and Gil Boyne, just to name a few of them. He developed the Hypnosis Training Institute of Idaho in 1989. He also did hypnotism training international in Utah in 1981 and Personal Achievement Center for Private Consultation and morphed into Sleep Now Production, Inc. Sleep Now went online in 1994 as a leader in hypnosis information and technology. From 1995 to 2002, Don Spencer produced the longest running weekly hypnosis shows in the world, and at the time for an amazing 320 straight weeks. He has begun traveling internationally with his Sleep Now comedy hypnosis show, his wellness clinic, and corporate program. Welcome, please welcome Don Spencer. Hi, Don, welcome. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm enjoying being here, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Don. Now, Don, I know you have such an interesting career. I want you to talk about how you started in hypnosis, because I know you have such a fascinating story. So please talk to me, because you started hypnosis at the age of 12. So talk about that, please.
My career in hypnosis actually began in the early 1980s. But my first experience with hypnosis, I was 12 years old, and I had a friend, a girlfriend, and her father was in the Navy, and he used to hypnotize her when she goes, you want to see what my dad, has taught me how to do. And I go, okay. And so she had me sit down, she put her head in my lap, and she wanted me to rub her temples and have her count backwards from 100. And she goes, now, when I can't say anything more, then you can tell me to do whatever you want, and I'll do it. And I thought, okay. So I did that. And then, then she didn't say anything. And I would say, okay, stand up, sit down, laugh, cry. It was kind of like, the game Simon Says. And that's kind of, the way my mind worked, because at 12 years old, you don't really connect the dots with hypnosis. So, to fast forward that into the future, when I was going to college studying psychology, and I believe it was in my third year of undergraduate in my abnormal psychology class, there was a paragraph on hypnosis. And, it reminded my mind of that event that happened when I was 12, because I had never really given it any thought ever until I was in college. And so it totally fascinated me. It reawakened that concept of what is hypnosis. So as Providence would have it, I started searching for someplace locally, and I was living in Escondido, California at the time, which is in Southern California. And I found an individual's name was Al Krasner, and he was holding a public demonstration lecture. And there was maybe 200 people there, and I went there and watched it. And he was talking about the mind and how the mind works, and then he was doing demonstrations. And I was sitting there watching this, and it just kind of hit me. It's like, okay, that's it. That's kind of like the missing link, because psychology is a study of human behavior. Hypnotherapy is a science of altering, changing, and amending behavior. So it kind of, really, it turned my thinking around, and I immediately signed up for his class. And it was a weekend class. So I learned a little bit about hypnosis and had my first experience really being hypnotized and hypnotizing individuals consciously. And after that, then I took another class with, I believe after that was with Gil, and that was a 3-week course in Los Angeles, Gil Boyne. And then and then I took various courses like with Charles Tebetts and Ormand McGill. But I think my greatest influence probably had to be Jim Russell. He's no longer practices. He lives up in Montana, but I studied with him for a year and a half. And he had classes locally in Escondido where I lived. And I went to his classes for maybe 5 nights a week. And on weekends, I did that for a year and a half. And it was really in depth. We went everything from beginning hypnosis to advanced, analytical hypnotherapy, therapeutic techniques. And, he was kind of a pioneer. He was before NLP, and he wrote a book called Psychosomatic Parenthetics, which was kind of like NLP. But it was a great class, and through that class, we did a lot of great things. We learned deprogramming. We used to study cults, and, we would help exit people out of cult mind control groups. We'd get them out of there, and we'd have to wash their brains out and get them back to normal. And we would go to different, cult group awareness happenings and watch people as they got brainwashed and sucked into these different cults. And that was really pretty interesting to do that aspect. So that's what really got me into hypnosis. After that, I jumped into hypnotherapy full time. I actually dropped out of college because I was so fascinated with hypnotherapy. So after 3 or 4 years of psychology and all the other academic classes you take is when you go to college, I just said, been there, done that. This thing just fascinates me, and so I jumped into hypnosis full time. Opened up a clinic in Southern California, and after a few months, I moved up to Idaho and opened up another clinic because at the time I became a single father. I had 3 kids at the time, and so it was just me and them. And at the time I moved to Idaho, I opened up a clinic and started teaching also at the College of Southern Idaho. And I did that for about 4 years, at the college. And that was really instrumental to me as far as, really honing my skills with doing hypnosis and doing demonstrations and working with groups of people. So, the classes I taught were on hypnosis, self-hypnosis, meditation, sexuality, past life
regression. Mm-hmm.
And different healing modalities. So I just jumped full force into everything. And then I started school, Hypnotherapy Training Institute in Idaho. And what I liked about that is I would invite people who are very, very smarter than me in so many ways in different fields. Like I invite psychiatrists and social workers and psychologists, police officers, FBI, all these people who would come and they would talk to my class. I didn't want to just teach hypnosis, because if people were going to come to learn hypnotherapy, I wanted them to have a well-rounded education. So I wanted to incorporate, religion, the arts, sociology, and whatever I can, could bring in there to introduce people to, more information to make them, hopefully a better human being when working with individuals. So that's how I got my start with doing hypnosis. And that was back in 1983.
And looking back now, because your career is very, very interesting. Looking back, is there anything that you feel, oh, I wish I should have done that, or I wish I should have done this?
Not really. It's because I started off doing hypnotherapy, and just one thing was a little bit different in your introduction. Over 1 million people hypnotized, not 1,000.
Oh, 1 million. Sorry, my mistake. Over 1 million people.
No,
yes.
That's okay. It's interesting because when I began doing hypnotherapy, I kind of said, okay, universe, give me, show me what you got. Give me your stuff. Let's see what's out there. And so I spent my first few years working mostly with multiple personality disorder, which now is called dissociative identity disorder.
Mhm.
Back then it was MPD. And I worked a lot with adult victims of early childhood sexual abuse, satanic ritual abuse. And I was actually on a force. Um, it was a police force that covered the whole aspect from southern Idaho into Utah, because there was a lot of satanic ritual abuse going on and that we uncovered. And so I, got involved with with the task force, uncovering that and helping people come out of it. So that was something I would never want to do again, but it was definitely eye-opening. So, I did that for a while, and, then I moved down to Utah because I got so busy in Idaho, and I was having students coming from Utah and different places to study with me in little old Idaho where I was at. So I moved to a bigger market, and after a couple of years of opening up a new school in Utah, maybe it was 3 years, and I started at that time doing comedy hypnosis shows because I just needed a little bit of laughter, after working with such intense individuals on their traumas and their life stories. I needed to laugh a little bit. So I started working in nightclubs. I worked in nightclubs for about 5 or 6 years. While I was doing my clinic, I did my clinic, but during the day, and I was still teaching. I had, teaching on weekends and in the evenings. And then I was working in comedy clubs, doing a circuit in the Northwest, until I finally got invited by a local theater in Salt Lake City who wanted me to come and do a weekly show, which I actually turned them down when they first approached me, because I didn't want to do a weekly show in a theater for a group of individuals that was unlike anything I had ever done. After working in nightclubs, you're used to, being a little bit unbridled in your approach of working with people. So I had to put it down, but I did. So I finally said to the guy, I said, okay, I'll do it. I talked to him on a Monday, and he said, start Saturday night. So I kind of reinvented my whole show, the approach that I did. And, the opening night, it was kind of nice because that's when Ormand McGill and individuals who are in the world of stage hypnosis will be familiar with that name, because he's kind of like what we call the grandfather of stage hypnosis. But he was a friend of mine, him and his wife, before they passed away. And he happened to be in Utah that weekend when I opened up my show. And he's actually gave me the moniker of the world's fastest hypnotist, because he watched the show and he goes, Spencer, I have never seen anybody do hypnosis as fast as that. Because what I did, I developed a style that was so unusual, so different than anybody else had ever done it at that point. Because I wanted to have it be very entertaining and showmanship. And, I brought in, aspects, from the world of entertainment, like rock and roll concerts, different effects to make it really, really popular. So that went for 6.5 years, 320 straight weeks. And then I finally got burned out, so I don't want to do it anymore, which was not bad, because then I began getting international phone calls and emails. That's when the advent of the internet. And I just started traveling internationally, doing, productions around the world, which was like pretty cool. You get to travel around the world and everything is paid, and, you have a fun time, and,
doing what you love, right?
Yeah, so it was cool. So I met a lot of really, really neat people doing it that way. And I have a lot of friends, around the world to this day that I still keep in contact with just through that. And then, I do a lot of corporate events.
Mhm.
It slowed down a lot, since everybody in the last 2 years, because of this pandemic that we've been tossed into. That's a whole nother story about mind control.
Mind controlling, yes. I mean, you can talk about that if you like right now.
We could talk about it, but that's kind of been, I think, for the most part, my career. And I also do, besides doing, classes and teaching hypnosis, everything from beginning to advanced hypnosis skills. I also do vision quests, where I take groups of people out into the wilderness, and we spend a week, and we, look into shamanism and how plant medicine can help to transform the way we act, think, and feel, how to use plant medicine in a way that's creative to step into the other aspect of our neurology, and transform ourselves and see things as they really are. It's kind of like breaking open the matrix. When you do a psychedelics, it kind of opens up the portal to the other world. Then
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so, one of the reasons for the Vision Quest is that, once you learn how to enter into that world through the help of plant medicine, then you can fine tune your reality, that you don't really need to use plant medicine to enter there. You can just step in and out of there at will, by thought. You can just have a thought and move into, using hypnotic principles or whatever you want to call that.
Like self-hypnosis in a way, right? Where
but, you think about a psychic. A psychic, they go into a trance, or they just they go into some kind of that was supposed to be on. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Supposed to be in some kind of a space where they can enter in and they can see things. They can see the future and they can see the past. The shaman does the same thing. The shaman, they can go inside and they can do soul retrievals and so forth. And then you have the schizophrenic. The schizophrenic is just an individual who has already learned, not really learned. I mean, it's a brain thing. It's a chemical imbalance, but they're stuck in a world that the shaman, the psychic, and other people can enter into, but they're stuck there. They just can't come out. That's what wigs them out so much. So if you can learn to work with schizophrenia, by just realizing that they're just stuck in a trance they can't get out of, then we can enter in that trance with them and, maybe be of help for them, without medicine. But some people do need, sometimes need medicine to help.
Yeah, sometimes that's required. And like you mentioned something very interesting now, because you've been doing hypnosis for a very long time and you've trained with people for a long time. So repetition and frequency is very important, right? Because the more you do something, the better you become at it. You mentioned that you followed one of your mentors for a year and a half. Talk to me about that. Tell the viewers what were the most important takeaways from that experience, a year and a half with a mentor who, and why is it important to have a mentor? Because I feel that we learn vicariously. So, what would be something that you can share with the listeners about your experience that you've had following your mentor for a year and a half?
Well, I lived here, and it was a class that he offered, and I really wanted to know it. I wanted to know it inside and out. And Jim had a very interesting mind, because he had a lot of knowledge with hypnosis and mind control. He worked for the government too and did some things we won't really discuss. But I liked his approach. Him and his wife had a clinic in a school down in Escondido. And so there was a group of us who, studied together for the entire time. I think there was probably maybe about 20 or 30 of us, that kind of stuck it out, the whole time. There's, of course, ongoing people floating in and out. But I liked the way that he thought. I liked the way that he could pick people apart. You take a person, you could talk to them, and you begin to understand, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and you look beyond just what the words are saying. You also look into, the body movement, which is, basic Gestalt. Gestalt teaches,
Yes.
what we say and how the body responds may be completely different.
Kind of like reading his body language, right?
Yeah, it's like body language. So you do that, you can learn how to read the body, Gestalt that, and other things that we studied, like Carl Rogers, which was people-centered therapy, I think it was called at the time, who was, back in the day, he was, one of the, psychology leaders, him and Fritz Perls, with Gestalt and some other individuals.
Yes.
Functional emotive therapy and transactional analysis, all good, all very, very good systems. But and then of course, with today, you have with like Paul Ekman, who does micro expressions when you learn how to read basic.
The facial emotions, yes. I've actually trained in that. So
just a little, like little
Anger, yeah.
that people make with their eyes or their
Yeah.
brows, like anger, frustration, all those different things. So, and they happen just like that, and so you pick up on that, and you just take a mental note of it, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
I got this, so yeah, so I studied with a lot of really fascinating people, and I think some of the people too who were really fascinating were, because I studied with a number of shamans also for quite a while, really learning plant medicine and learning that aspect of the spirituality with them, aside from my from my Christian beliefs, so I try to incorporate everything that I know into what I do, as a human being with individuals. But
Mhm.
yeah, so it's just fascinating. And one of the other guys that I studied with, which was kind of cool, didn't really study with him. We just became good friends. His name is Steve Van Appern, and he's down in Australia. And he's called the human lie detector. And so he travels around the world, not as much because of COVID, but doing lectures to big corporations and big businesses and governments, and just on lie
Facial
detector.
emotions and body language, right?
Reading,
Yeah.
reading face, the words that we use, the tonality, and everything,
Yeah.
it does lie detector test machines, and
The way you
really,
move your hands and the way you position yourself. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so we got to talking, and one day, well, I was actually in Australia, and he came to one or two of my classes and studied with me because he wanted to learn hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and as we got to talking, we kind of came to the conclusion that we do actually the same thing where people, when he interviews people, people are trying to be deceptive. And so he's trying to find out how they're being deceptive and how to break through that lie, right?
Yes.
And therapy, what we do, I mean, it's the same thing. We're watching for all these cues, but people
Yes.
don't come to us to lie, but they're lying to themselves, and we try to help them to come out of that, right?
Yeah. We try to help them to release their emotions
Yeah.
and yeah, that's right. And
So we collaborated. We actually put together a program, and I don't think I have it on my website. I redid my website, but it's the program is called "Is Everybody Lying?"
okay.
Yeah, so it's a real neat, you can get ebook and video presentation that him and I put together. And one of these days I'll get it back to my website. But it's pretty fascinating. He's a real nice guy, so we hit it off, and we're still good friends to this day.
I'm very familiar with him. I trained in body language, so I'm very familiar with body language, facial emotions, and how powerful they are, especially for us um, as hypnotists.
Right.
So tell me, Dawn, um, what was your takeaway from, like, what did you learn throughout your experiences? Because I know you did a lot of hypnosis shows, and you've traveled the world with that. What were the things that you enjoyed the most? What did you learn for that? If you could change anything, what would that be? Talk to us about that.
If I could change anything, what would it be?
Yeah, if you would go back and say, I mean, you've done so many shows, you hypnotized a million people, and I'm sure there were times when you said, okay, I mean, myself, we learn doing something, right? I usually do something and then I go back and I say, okay, now I see, now I should have tweaked that a little bit here, tweaked that a little bit there. Is there anything that you feel, oh, maybe I should have done it this way, or what did you learn from it? What was your takeaway from
You know,
all these beautiful shows that you did?
I think I can honestly say that I probably learned more about human dynamics and behavior doing the comedy hypnosis shows and being a therapist,
Talk
right?
to us about that. Talk to me about human dynamics. What specifically?
When you're working with a group of people, for example, right?
Yeah.
Because for example, when I was doing the show in Salt Lake City, we average about 500 people a week in the show. So over the course of my time there doing the shows, I had over 100,000 people in attendance at my show, right?
Yeah.
So, and then after that, I got hired by the 2002 Winter Olympic to be the official Olympic hypnotist, which was kind of fun too. But what you learn from when you work with a lot of people is that especially group, you have to, if you've got like 20 or 30 people on stage, I mean, you're looking at all these people simultaneously. You've got to read everybody.
Yes.
Looking at their eyes, their lips, their every little twitch, every little movement that they have, every word that you say influences them in one way or another. And
That's right.
when you're doing the show, not only are you influencing the people on stage, your subjects, but you're also influencing the audience.
The audience, yes.
So you have, hundreds of people out there, that you get to deal with and influence, and then you got the people behind you, your subjects that you're working with. And so it's kind of nice because it's kind of you become the conductor. You've got this wonderful orchestra of people in the audience. And for me, and I'm sure I speak this for, most entertainers in that capacity, is that, I think that what we like is to have the audience in the palm of our hand. We want people to laugh when we say laugh, or to cry, or to feel. We're always trying to get people to have an emotion, to have some kind of feeling to what we're doing.
To be part of the show, yes.
Yeah, because that's what gives us energy. That's what, that helps to know that we are doing something correct when we get all that feedback from people. If we hear laughter, we're going, okay, I'm doing something right. Or if we hear laughter, we may have to stop for a second and kind of give a little look, and because you can use facial expressions also, in the entertainment way to get different reactions from the audience or from the people up on stage as well.
Yes.
So in that capacity, I learned, I think, more about the dynamics of people just by doing that, because you have people from all walks of life,
yes,
all different religions, all different political spectrums. And besides that, I mean, and that's just here in America. But when I started going to like the Philippines, or to Thailand, or to Australia, or to France, or to Ireland, or to South America, or the Caribbeans, or wherever I ended up going, people were all different, or
different culture, yes.
Or going to Saudi Arabia, Dubai, or to Oman. I mean, they're different cultures,
Different body language too, because emotions are universal, but body language is not.
Try doing a show in Saudi Arabia. They say, okay, you cannot touch their head, you cannot touch, the women in any way, and make sure their feet are flat on the floor, right? You can't see the bottoms of their feet. So you're always learning these different cultural, I won't, oddities or whatever, but the saying is, when in Rome, be as the Romans. And so when I go to different cultures, I never try to impose what I believe or what I think. I'm just always going there and going, wow, this is so fascinating. What can I learn from the culture? What can I learn from that? And it makes me a better person by learning that. But what I found, at the crux of all that, because when I travel internationally and I do shows, I always end up doing a couple group presentations, and then I'll squeeze some time, because there's always people that want to see me privately. So I usually set up time to see, maybe 20 or 30 people. So, I'll go for a couple of weeks, work for 3 or 4 days, and, have about a week and a half of downtime. But with that, it doesn't matter which country that you go to, or what religion or, political structure that a person is in. On the emotional level, which is why people come to us, the therapist, and get stuck somewhere. Everybody gets stuck for the same reason, They, they're somewhere in their life they've experienced some kind of emotional pain, and they just want to feel better.
Exactly.
Where my role, your role, and the hypnotherapist comes in, is trying to help people to just feel better about who they are, and help them to unravel the mysteries of their own consciousness, or their own unconsciousness, or subconsciousness, depending on who you want to ask.
I usually say to people, we cannot change your past. Your past is your past, but we can change the perspective of what happened to you. So
sounds like a Milton Erickson statement to me. All right.
All right.
We always said that, it's like a different perspective, because we don't change what happens. All we do is we can change the perception that a person has about that experience, and help them to see it differently. And when they can, with a different aspect of their mind, then people get better, when they can,
exactly,
with love, understanding, and forgiveness. Those are the things that heal. But that's what heals.
Those are very important.
Because when we can do that, then we can move away from the need to judge, criticize, or condemn. Because within those constraining concepts of judgments and condemnations and criticisms is where the world falls apart, and where we as an individual fall apart in our own circle of friends, family, and loved ones.
That's true. And I think part of it we are experiencing right now.
Well, yeah, on the global level, that's a whole different ball of wax with this thing that's going on with the world, because it's not just America, it's not just Canada, it's just not, I mean, it's the whole world that
It's worldwide.
this global cabal has gotten together, decided that, we're going to take over the world, and we're going to force everybody to take a procedure that they don't want. That's to this day has been improving, and that as days go by, it's showing that more and more people are getting hurt by it. In any other time of human history, that jab, I don't know where this is going to go out, just some language has to be coded so they don't shut you down, that the people who get that, people are suffering, people are getting hurt by it, and it's starting to come out, and it's sad, that's what's happening. And, you look at places like Australia where they're locking people up, and Austria where people are being locked up, and now in Canada, in another week, you won't be able to leave the country, unless you have a vaccine passport, which just boils my blood to no end.
Well, I always say is if we have faith and we focus on doing something positive, I feel being more spiritual will always help. And that takes me to my next question to you. Do you have a ritual or a practice that before you did so many shows, was there anything that you did before stepping on that stage to face so many people? What did you do to make yourself to be more positive? Because I mean, were you nervous? What went through your mind when you stepped on that stage and you had hundreds of thousands of people there? Share that with us, because I'm sure, as human beings, we go through so many emotions mentally. What did you do before? Did you meditate? Did you have a mantra? What did you do before you stepped on that stage?
It depended where I was. If I was in a nightclub, I'd have a few drinks with people who get loosened up, and we just have a great time. And in other environments where that was not, part of what you do, I just used, a hypnotic trance. It's just a self-hypnosis procedure. And so if you can imagine that this is my microphone, this pen, right?
Yeah.
So I just, I program myself that as soon as I take the microphone, I'm no longer just, Don Spencer, the guy next door, walking down the street or whatever. I am now Spencer, the world's fastest hypnotist. And so you take on this persona. And so I just simply use, NLP techniques to anchor myself to this very positive state that I get up there and I just transfer myself, and that's it.
So you acted as if, right? That's acted as if, right?
Yeah. So it was just, and that's what I like about entertainment, is because you can create a whole new persona, that's not you, but maybe it is you, but it's fun. It's acting. So, I like that, because you can take on this persona and you get up there and, you can be this whole different individual, for the hour that you're up there, and then
pretend, right? As a mother, I used to tell my kids, pretend that you are this person, or pretend that it's all okay. That little scratch is going away. Pretend that it's no longer there.
Well, it's kind of like Erickson said. He goes, if you pretend very well, maybe you'll get there.
Yes.
So I tell people that, you pretend that you're this, and then maybe you're going to wake up one day and it won't be pretend anymore. Maybe you will be actually who you want to be.
Who you want to be. Yeah. That is right. That's right. That's Mike Mansell words. That's right.
Yeah, I can't really think of a time that I was ever really nervous getting up on stage, because I always enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are times when you get into when you have bigger shows where you have 1,000 or 5,000 people out there, and you're sitting in the green room, and you got the monitor and you're looking at all the people coming in. You're sitting there going, oh, look at all those people. It's like, oh, I hope I remember everything. So, there's a little bit about that, but that's what the anchor is for, because as soon as I pick up the microphone, all that stuff just kind of dissolves.
So you really did anchor that microphone. So the moment you picked that up, that's it. You went into that person who you are no longer Don Spencer. You are the fastest hypnotist in the world.
Yeah, and even to this day, I do the same thing. It's like, I might be a little bit, like, here we go, gotta get on, gotta get ready. People are there, they expect a certain thing, but that's just all monkey talk in the head, because I've done so many shows. I can do the show, blindfolded, which isn't really a stretch. but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
So much a part of who I am. I don't really have to think about it. I can just get out there, and it doesn't matter what kind of audience I have. I can move and flow into whatever audience is before me. Same thing with doing lectures. People, want me to come and talk about something. I can talk about a lot of things. So it's just kind of flows off me very naturally because I've done it for so many years. So it becomes a part of who you are. So anybody who's thinking about becoming a hypnotist or wants to do anything in this capacity, just do it over and over and over and over again. Study with everybody. When I first started, I studied, with the 3, 4, 5 main people. But I went to conferences like with the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners on the West Coast, on the East Coast, the National Guild. I belonged to both of them. I went to all their, to all their conventions. And then when the I can't think who's the new one. The new kid on the block. There'll be their 10-year anniversary next year in Vegas.
Mark Savar.
Hypnothoughts.
Hypnothoughts, yes. And Mark Savar is in Vegas. He's been there for about 15 years.
Yeah. Well, it'll be 10 years, so it'll be 10-year anniversary next year.
Hypnothoughts, yes.
But what I liked about when I ran Hypnothoughts a few years ago, and I heard about them when they first began, but I didn't really jump into it because I was kind of burned out at that point with going to all these trainings I got, because I trained so much. I didn't want to do it anymore. I just wanted to do my thing. And I was finally talking to going to the conventions again. And I had a great time. Big group of people, no politics. Doesn't matter if you're the East Coast, the West Coast. Doesn't matter if you're, straight or gay or black or white or ugly or pretty or, or all that stuff. It's just a group of people coming together that have a love for.
And to learn, right, from each other, because.
And, just want to share their craft, different ways.
Yeah.
And I like that. So good group of people. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Repetition and frequency. What did you take away from training with Gil Boyne and Charles Tebetts? Because they were. I've read some of their books and some of their trainings. What was your takeaway? I know Gil Boyne was he was so focused on his hypnosis, and he had his own process, and he really had to take you down and really hypnotize you.
Well, I won't tell you what I really think, but I'll give you an overview.
Give us an overview.
I knew them all very well, right?
Yes.
I was close to all of them, so we had.
But give us the nuggets that helped you transition. That's.
I can tell you this. I'll keep it on the good side of everybody. From Gil, I think probably what I liked about him is he had a very direct approach, and I like that. He didn't pull any punches. He didn't beat around the bush. He just got right in there and did the work.
Yes.
Which was impressive. I like that. So as far as a clinician, I liked the work that he did. Charles Tebetts, he was. I like Charles. He was like this big, tall, lanky guy, and he actually wrote the book on wrote a good book on self-hypnosis and
yes, he did.
Therapy. And Gil actually got a lot of his concepts from Charles. Gil was just more tough about it. Where Charles is just more of a gentle type of a soul.
That's the impression I got also from the trainings, and I have a lot of audio tapes from Gil, and I have some trainings from Charles, and that's my impression as well.
Yeah. There's a lot of that personal dynamics behind the scene, but it is what it is with everybody. But Everybody has their good points and their low points. No, in that respect, he was the book that he wrote, Transformational Therapy, was it was an okay book. I don't think it was anything special, but to see Gil working with people, that was good. I really enjoyed that. The classes I took with him was really good. I learned a lot from him. Charles, he came in like Ormand McGill, because Gil, he had his regular school, and he would bring in guest lecturers, and Charles was one of those, and Ormand was one of those too. But I fell in love with both those guys because I just really liked the different aspects of them. So I spent a lot of time with each one of them separately. And and Ormand, he was different. Ormand wasn't really a hypnotherapist in that regard. He was first a magician, and who became a hypnotist because there was more money in it. But him and his wife, he was such a gentle soul, and he did some stage hypnosis training that I took from him in the early days, probably back in maybe 82, 83. He did a course, at the Institute. I think I took that either with Jim or either with Gil. I don't remember which one. So many. Did I answer your question? I simply feel like I did.
Yes, you did. I have one more question for you.
Yeah, please.
If you can share something with the audience, something that you can maybe teach in a very short amount of time, a couple of minutes, about hypnosis, what would you say to my listeners? A nugget that they can take away and say, wow, yes.
Well, I would probably, I come from the, persuasion after all these years. Now, before I say that, the way that Gil approached doing hypnosis, right? Very sweet, it's like he wanted to talk you into hypnosis, doing all these real manly type things. He was real parental in his approach. Or you get into NLP was more, and Ericksonian hypnosis was more maternal than the paternal approach.
Yes.
So they kind of,
the two of them are very different. Yes.
They're very different. And I threw away Gil's approach, to being so forceful, because I didn't like that. I didn't like that because what happens is that when you get people that come into your office who have had, backgrounds in abuse or whatever, last thing they want is for you to yell at them, to scream at them, to sleep or whatever it is.
Right. Yes.
But I took all of that and I used that in my shows. So that was good for demonstrating hypnosis and being a badass up on stage. So that aspect I utilized on stage because that part was good, because I could take that. The maternal approach, which is probably more of what I use now. So to answer your question, everybody is already in a trance, and there's nothing that we have to do to hypnotize a person. When we realize that people are in a trance, all we have to do is understand the trance that they are in, go into that trance with them, and then we can understand that. Because if you, instead of trying to change somebody, understand where they're at,
and
jump into their reality, feel it, understand that, then you can guide them out of that when you realize that they're already in a trance.
So really we are dehypnotizing them because they're already hypnotized when they come to see us, right?
Yeah, but everybody's in a trance. You know that everybody.
Everybody's
hypnotizing. So the only question that I have is, does it work for you?
That's a pretty good question. Does it work for you?
Last year, it's like the only trance that I don't like is the pedophilia, the satanic, and the murderers. I don't like those people. I won't work with any of them.
No.
Those are just evil, horrible people. And that's a whole different kind of work anyway. That gets more into working with spirituality. It's not so much hypnosis. Kind of like when you like demon possession and things like that I believe is absolutely real without a shadow of a doubt. And that's not really hypnosis. So you're doing spiritual work, and that's completely different. But but people are already in a trance, and when I train people, I'll take them out, we'll wander around, or we'll go to restaurants, or we'll go to places, and we'll just sit down and I'll just have them, just start looking at people, and I just ask the question. It's like, what kind of a trance are they in? They go, what do you mean? I go, it's just watch them for a few minutes,
And see, yeah.
Imagine that you could just like jump inside their body and become who they are, right?
And feel what they're thinking.
Yeah, then you can feel that, and
Yeah.
I think that's one of the processes they teach, I think in NLP, with the early process, you sit across from somebody and you look at them and
You mirror them, and yeah.
yeah, and then you try to, to feel what they're feeling. And
Yes.
and it's actually pretty amazing when you do that, because you really can be pretty damn spot on when you learn how to do it very well.
Yes.
I had been doing that for, most of my life, because I see things in people. I always have. I can read a person pretty well, and so studying hypnosis, studying NLP, and studying spirituality and shamanism, it kind of fine-tuned a lot of stuff that I intuitively already was doing and what I knew, but it helped me to understand what I was doing and to be better at what I was doing, and
Right.
understand it, and psychology, going to college, it gave me the ability to have a conversation with somebody who was smart in a way that was intelligent to them, not to me.
Tell me then, what do you do now? Because I know you still practice hypnosis, so you're still helping people. I know you stepped away from doing live events, but if any of the listeners want to reach out to you, where they can go to find out more.
Yeah, if you want more information, just go to my website at sleepnow.com, and you can get a hold of me there. I believe there's a contact page on there. There should be.
There is a contact page there, and you still do consultations. So
yeah, I do consultations. I started doing Zoom conferences. Actually, it started with Skype probably about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Just because when I began to do international travel, I had people who wanted to work with me, and I was stuck with working on a computer, which I carried on to this day. So I would say probably 90% of my clientele is, here, in the computer world.
On Zoom.
And then I still see some people here locally. If people wanted to see here, I have a home office. So people will come here to my home office and I'll see them here. So
that's great. So if any of the listeners wish to do a consultation with you or one-on-one, they can always go to sleepnow.com, correct?
They can.
Yeah. Perfect. Don, I want to thank you so much for being here with me. I so appreciate that. And, I'm sure I'll bring you back again, but, and I'm sure that my listeners took away a lot of nuggets from your learnings, from your experience. And I want to say thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure having this conversation with you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's been an honor. Thank you.